Podcast number 29, July 16th, 2009.
Hey, this is Brian Collins from HorrorMovieAday.com, and you are listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to the Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I'm your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. Coming to you from Los Angeles, the very hot Los Angeles. My least favorite time of year here in the City of Angels. It's just way too hot for my liking. Of course, I know what you're thinking. What are you doing in LA? Well, that's a whole nother story. But for the next couple of months, I'm just going to have to bear with it and deal with the 100-degree plus temperatures. Welcome to the show. As you heard at the top, Brian Collins is our guest for tonight. He is from the website Horror Movie A Day. Well, that's because he watches one a day. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. How he started this, and what his favorite movies are, and all the usual questions that you would expect for an interview such as this. And he's got some great stuff, so trust me. You're not going to want to miss this one. So stay tuned. Brian Collins from Horror Movie A Day, joining me in just a few minutes. I guess Brian's rubbed off on me a little bit this week because I've been catching up on a lot of movies. It seems like I've almost been watching a horror movie a day, even though I haven't been. It's been nice being able to just pop a couple of DVDs in there and relax and watch some horror movies. And I do have to say, the one that really did stand out for me was Let the Right One In. I know that everything that can be said about that particular movie has been said, so I'm really not going to add too much to the conversation. My biggest fear going into it, though, was that at this stage of the game, having heard how great the movie was and all the great reviews, you know, there is such a thing as overhype or too much positive, I guess you could say, feedback on a particular movie. And usually what happens is that by the time you get to it, it can't live up to the hype. And that really was my biggest fear going into that movie. And man, it really lived up to the expectations. It just a really well done movie. A movie that if there wasn't a vampire in the movie, it could easily have been a drama. Which, those are the horror movies that I really enjoy watching. The kind that, if you took the actual horror element out of it, there is a story still there. And that's the one thing I always loved about reading Stephen King novels, is that you get that feeling that these are real people in real situations, and then suddenly the fantastic begins to happen around them. So definitely check out Let the Right One In if you haven't seen it. I rented it on DVD. I was going to get it on iTunes, but I guess there's some sort of issue with the subtitles. This week's What's Out There? A suggestion from one of my listeners out there, Paul from Michigan. He suggested a comic book series by the name of The Walking Dead. Now, if you're a reader of comics, you're probably very well familiar with this particular comic book series. But for those that aren't, and you like zombies, and you just so happen to like comics, well, you should definitely check this out. It's called The Walking Dead. Well, let's get to it, shall we? Gravediggers, get to work. And as you hear in the background, it's time to talk movies. A horror movie a day is the website that my guest has started because he watches a horror movie a day, and we're going to get into it. And without any further ado, I introduce to you Brian Collins. Enjoy. How many horror movies have you seen in your lifetime? Well, I bet not as many as my next guest. He's Brian Collins, and he watches a horror movie a day. And he now joins me here in the graveyard. Brian, thanks for taking the time to stop into the graveyard.
Oh, hey, man. No, anytime. I like it.
So let's talk about your website, Horror Movie a Day. What gave you the idea to watch a horror movie a day?
Basically, what happened was I had like a Blockbuster account, and I realized one day that I had the same 3 movies for something like 3 months. And I was like, wow, I just paid, $15 a month or whatever. I just paid $45 to rent these things. I could have probably bought them all for less.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to start forcing myself to watch these things. And then of course I look at them and all 3 of them are horror. And I'm like, oh, that actually may be kind of cool to do this thing, right? Like every day I watch a horror movie, because this is right around not too long after I started working on the side for Bloody Disgusting. And so obviously I was hanging out with more horror type people, talking about horror movies more often. And people mention movies I hadn't seen yet and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, this is perfect. I'll bone up on my my knowledge of the older stuff. Make sure I see the new stuff, everything. And so I just started. At first, it was just watching them.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Disgusting actually, who runs Bloody, was like, oh, this would be a cool feature on Bloody, and every day you just say what movie you watch and talk about it a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I could do that, but it never really kind of worked out on Bloody for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, oh, I'll just do it on a blog, and every day I'll write up a little mini review, and just see what happens, And that was the March of '07, and here we are, July?
Yeah, July of '09. So over 2 years. So yeah. How do you find the time to fit a horror movie a day in?
I don't
know if I could, to be honest.
It's all a lie. I actually haven't watched it. No. At first it was kind of hard because I was, you have a day, I have a day job. You have a day kind of planned out. What you do every day, and it's just kind of hard at first to kind of wedge that in. But then now, it's been so long. It's just it's the weirdest thing when I see a movie, because the rule is anytime between 12:01 a.m. and 11:59 p.m. is when I watch the movie, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's Saturday night, I'll go to the midnight movie down at the New Beverly or something. But
sure.
Of course, it starts till after midnight, so it's technically Sunday's movie.
Okay.
And then I go to bed, and then I wake up, and the whole day I feel like I'm missing something, and I had to keep reminding myself, no, I've already watched my movie for the day. You're all set. It's just part of my day now. It's almost harder not to have the time, So if I watch something really short, or like I said with that, it's like having extra time almost. It's like something I've kind of. Like taking a shower or eating dinner. It's just part of the day.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because
time.
I was gonna say that I would say that you're more than a movie reviewer, and we'll get into the whole idea of reviews versus summaries as you put in your blog. It's like you're a professional movie viewer or a professional horror movie watcher. You're seeing one a day, and do you have a preference of seeing a film in the theater versus at home, or does it not really matter?
It doesn't really. Obviously it can't. If I had a theater in my backyard, I'd watch every movie in there. But I don't think it really matters. I know I just posted a review for Dead Snow, for example, and I start off by pointing out that I'd heard from friends that didn't like it, but they were watching it at home on these DVD screeners. Mm-hmm. And there's when you're in the theater, there's unless some jackasses cell phone out, there's nothing else distracting you. There's the movie and that's it. You're a captive audience. At home, it's like movies that start off kind of slow, you know, it's like, all right, let me check my email while this is running. Oh, okay. Oh, look at that. There's, you know, new article up on, you know, The Youngin or whatever. You know what I mean? You just start getting more and more, you know, The Youngin or whatever. You know what I mean? You just start getting more and more distracted.
Sure.
So, I mean, yeah, I run into that a little bit, and so in that respect, I'd rather watch everything in a theater. But at the same time, there are movies that just play better at home, you know? There are certain movies that are just too long, you know? Like I watched The Stand 2 weeks ago, and that's 6 hours long. There's no way in hell I'd want to sit in the theater for 6 hours straight to watch that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say that's a hard one. I mean, yes, certainly there are films that do work better at home for the time factor like that, is where you can break it up and not have to sit through 6 hours in the theater. Although I know some people would go see the down here at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, like they'll have whatever the Back to the Future films. I think they had a few months ago, and I think it was one. Yeah, it was a trilogy. So you go in at noon or whatever, 1 o'clock, and you're out by 8 or whatever, and it's like, that's a long day. Or the Lord of the Rings trilogy or something. It's like, whoa.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Woo! I don't know how some people can do that, but some people do. Yeah. Now on your blog, you do post reviews, but they're not reviews. You call them summaries. So, what's the distinction between a review and a summary for you?
Well, I mean, it's sort of I probably should change that, because by now they are more kind of reviews. Because at first they were a lot shorter, first of all, and they didn't really have much form to them. They're just sort of like, I like this part. There's a cool part with this, and there's still some of that. But at first the whole thing was like, I'm going to spoil the movie. The idea was that I was writing down the reaction, like you'd have when you walked out of the movie. Like if you go see a movie with your friends and you walk out and you don't say like, this movie was about a guy who sees a murder, and then you just say like, oh, part was awesome. So that was originally the intent. It was just sort of kind of like talk about a movie via the internet. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because obviously I watch a lot of these movies by myself. There's no way really to talk about it otherwise. And because obviously I'd seen quite a few, I only do movies I hadn't seen yet. A lot of the ones I end up doing are, more obscure, so it's less likely that, my friends have even seen it, but it's pretty likely that on the whole of the internet, all the people that read the site, 7 or 8 others at least have seen it, they can post what they thought about it too, But as far as like doing like the typical review, I mean, I just don't like doing like the summary, like talking about like, each aspect like in a structured way. I guess, some sites that are like, they always have it broken down the same way, like the story, the acting, the gore, you know what I mean? Like that to me is kind of boring. So it's just like you're shoehorning, your thoughts.
Sure.
And I just kind of like do it more freeform. But when the sites started getting more popular and, I noticed that like the reviews are being like linked up on other sites, like like the fan page for the actor, like, oh, there's a great review of whatever. Like people are gonna be coming in just to read that. They're not gonna appreciate me just like spoiling the movie right in the first paragraph.
Sure.
So I thought I try to like kind of phase out the spoiler and at least mark them when I do.
Yeah.
And I just I also don't assign like grades to it, because I think the example I used is I would give both, the original Halloween and Shocker a 10 out of 10, but there's no way in hell I'd actually say that those are equally good movies, you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
I bet people don't, sometimes people kind of miss that, and they're like, what? They just don't get it. So it's like, I'll just leave the letter grading or the number grading out of it entirely, and just, I hate when I have to, 'cause sometimes I see a movie for bloody, like a press screening or whatever.
Yep.
And, so a review, the review gets repasted over on Bloody, but I have to give it a grade for that. I hate that part of it. It's just like, I almost always just give it a 7, unless I didn't like it. I give it a 4.
That makes it nice and easy, that's for damn sure, because it's like, okay, there it is.
Well, the thing is, like, the thing about letter grades is, like, if you read the whole review, like, you could kind of tell whether or not I like the movie. And so it's like, do you really need like an A- or something at the end? And like, how's, like, I really like this one, I really like this one, but this one's an A- and this one's a B+. Why is that one just that much better? You know what I mean? It's like...
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you start micromanaging you know, your reviews, and then like I know, and this is from like me, I'd get so anal retentive about it that I'd be like, oh my god, I gave that movie an A-. Well, this is a little bit better, so I have to give it an A. I mean, if I give it an A-, and then you start like, forget it, I'd lose my mind and be in an insane asylum. Well, you mentioned on your blog that the first film that you watched in this horror movie a day cycle is Return to Horror High. And you said that that the day that you need to rewatch it and write a summary, that you would retire.
Fortunately, that's already come up, I think, because I'm already having trouble remembering what happened.
Well, I was going to say, how many films do you think you have seen now? I'm not even going to ask you just in general movies. I mean, how many horror movies do you think you've seen at this point?
Just for this, or
just in general? I mean, because obviously, you know, you watched them prior to the horror movie day, so I would think that these last, 26, 28 months, you know, you've added. Well, let's see, what's that? 700, 800, probably about 800 movies, right?
Yeah, actually, the review count is around 1,000. Might already be past it, but I've done a lot of movies that I had already seen before too.
Okay.
So, I don't know, probably.
Gosh.
I would say I wasn't watching as many before, but I'd say at least 1,500.
Was that all? Oh my God, that is unbelievable. So you must be popular with your friends. I mean, whenever they must just come right up to you and be like, "Okay, listen, Brian, we want to see this movie. What do what'd you think?" I mean, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's I know I said I didn't want to talk about Halloween, but that was the one. Whenever I'd hang out with people that weren't really into horror, like or go home and like talk to family or whatever, it was always like, "Did you see that?" I think it's like, Jesus, of course I did. And then like so happy when Friday the 13th came along because it like replaced it for a while. Like the non-horror people, like they were aware enough of that. You know what I mean? So instead, and at least I kind of liked that one, so it was a little more fun to talk about.
Sure.
But a lot of the guys I hang out with now out here in LA, like I said, they don't watch the real obscure ones, but as far as like all the new stuff, they see all the new stuff too. My buddy Uncle Creepy from Dread Central watch pretty much everything I see. Because he's the one I can count on that if I see something really obscure, like
sure. Yeah, it's like, hey, give him a call. Hey, let's do it, and I'm sure he's up for it. So, and that's always nice too, because I know what you mean. It's like if you don't have friends that are fans of the harder core stuff, or I don't even know if hardcore stuff. I mean, just things that are outside the mainstream. It's hard. I mean, because there are people that do look at horror in a certain way, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not right. So yeah, I bet it's probably hard at times to get people to go see films that are outside the mainstream.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Now,
even guys they're really into horror. Sometimes it's even hard to get them, like the new Beverly movies, because they just show really obscure stuff. It's
yeah.
Like, yeah, you want to go see this like 1972 movie that's never been released on DVD and no one's ever heard of? Like, no.
It's like, come on. I mean, the New Beverly is a really good place, and if people who are listening that are from LA, you got to go check movies out at the New Beverly. It is a great place to definitely see a movie, and they do get a good lineup. So is the Arrow and Egyptian. But since and I know we talked about not talking about Halloween, but since you did bring it up, and since it is so prominent on your website, and I promise I'll be brief with it because I don't want to wear you out with it. You mentioned that Halloween is that it's your favorite thing. So what? Yeah, I was gonna say, what is it? What is it that makes it your favorite thing?
I just love. You can't explain when you just love something that much. You know what I mean? Like that's what I did for when I actually did do a review for it. I'm just gonna write a real-time reaction to it. There's no way I could be like, the reason I like this movie, because like at this point I don't even know. It's just like it's been such a part of my life for so long.
Sure.
It's one of the first quote unquote classic horror movie. I think it was the first actually. I know I saw it. No, Chainsaw Massacre was probably the first classic one I watched. But in terms of like not just watching like whatever crap was on Cinemax, you know what I mean, or like Friday the 13th sequels, like this was like really classy, and even when I was like 12 or something, I liked it.
Yeah. And
then when I got a widescreen copy of it, I think when I was like 14 or 15, and I started like really paying attention, like, oh, like, it's cool how he framed this shot. Like I can see, I never noticed before that because of his payments game, Michael Myers is over there on the right side of the screen, but we're supposed to be looking at the left. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There's stuff like that. So it's just been like it's been like a viewable almost film school for me. You know?
Yeah.
Like the script and learned how to write scripts from that, and I just think it's like the perfect movie. It's almost plotless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's executed perfectly. I mean, there's nothing. Obviously, there's lines of dialogue that are questionable, and a couple of palm trees that you can see from that.
Yeah.
I mean, for what is important, it's the part. And I love slasher movies more than anything. So it's just like the ultimate.
Yeah. And especially for a slasher movie, there's really not very much blood in it. It's like Texas Chainsaw. It's funny that you should mention the two of them because I remember reading a review. I believe it was either a review or a film criticism. I can't remember, but I was reading it, and somebody had the writer was talking about how they were talking to a friend or somebody, and they're like, "Oh, Texas Chainsaw was just such a bloody movie," and they're like, "No, it's not. I mean, it's totally in your mind." And it does show how effective the classics, like especially the modern classics like Texas and Halloween, they can be just so effective.
The one part that really pisses me off on Scream is when they're watching Halloween. One of the minor characters is like, "Oh, there's so much blood." I'm like, wait a minute. All right, that guy's either improvising or Kevin Williamson's making a weird joke about it or something. Because there's no fucking blood in that movie, and he knows that better than anybody.
Yeah, it's true. I totally forgot about that.
I always expect Randy to be like, "There's no blood," and start on a rant about it or something.
Yeah, that would have been good though. That would have been good if that was written into the script. Now, you grade your film, or you have grades for film, not number grades, but you grade movies. Can you explain what the different? Because I know you have quite a few of them on there, but basically, can you explain what the different grades are, or some of them?
Oh, you mean like the genres?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, most of them are kind of self-explanatory: werewolf, vampire, that type of thing. I have a couple of oddball ones. There's one that's just called Horror ? And that's just movies that people tell me are horror, or even the director says they're horror, and I look at them and I'm just like, no, this is not horror. How is this a horror movie?
Yeah.
Actually, I got it up now. Let me click on it and get some titles here.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Gozu's one, because everybody's just like, "Oh, you gotta watch Gozu," and I'm watching. I'm like, all right, this is a movie about two dudes driving around. How's this a horror movie? And then at the end, a guy climbs out of a woman's vagina. I'm like, yeah, that's weird. It's not really horror.
Well, I think the Wicker Man. I think the original Wicker Man might be classified as that too. I mean, it's considered horror, but it's kind of more drama.
No, let's see what else we got here.
Or maybe
cult. When I say cult, I mean it's a movie about a cult, not a cult movie.
Okay.
So if I did Wicker Man, I think that's probably what I'd put it in. What else we got? Non-canon is what I label a movie when I review a movie I have seen a whole bunch of times, like when I did Halloween, or Dawn of the Dead or whatever.
Yep.
Predator is not the Predator movies, because apparently I have 36 of them. There's only 4. But those are just movies where it's about an animal or something, but not a giant version of the animal.
Yep.
That would be a monster movie.
Okay.
And then, I've also tagged a few the directors that have come up a lot, like Larry Cohen and Dario Argento.
Yep.
And Carpenter, obviously.
I think one of my favorites is Crap.
Crap, yeah. Crap's kind of getting phased out too, because I don't know if I've gotten soft or just nicer, or maybe just people are just starting to make better movies. Because if you look at if you click on it and you look at the dates, you'll see that they're becoming more and more infrequent. But those are just movies that have literally. I mean, there's there's the so bad it's good genre, right? Where you watch it, it's crap, but it's a bad. I mean, it's a bad horror movie, but you have a lot of fun watching it anyway. Something like, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 or whatever. Yeah. But these are the movies. The ones I label crap are the ones I just find no entertainment value in whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're just terrible from start to finish, soulless crap.
Now, just between you and me, Brian. Just between us and whoever else is listening. Have you ever watched a movie
that, like speaking of just crap movies, where like you start it, a couple minutes in, you know it's just going to be crap. Like it's going to be a total waste of your time. Have you ever just done the fast scan?
No, I watch every. I might have started it for that 4.5 hour Halloween documentary.
Okay.
Because, and it's not even a fast scan, it's if you watch it on the PS3,
yep.
You can hit it once and you'll get 1.5x, which is running basically 150% speed.
Yep.
And you can still hear it.
Okay.
So I might have tapped it a few times for that, because you can still hear everything. But as far as like actually fast forwarding over stuff, now I'm asleep.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered to rewind it if they're bad. But just a few minutes. No, don't fast forward, because it's like you get it. Somebody worked hard in the movie, right? And it's like the least I could do is give them the benefit of the whole, 90 minutes, right?
Well, that I have to say that is really good of you to do, because I cannot say that I haven't done that. I have done that. I've done that with some movies. I won't name names, but I have done that, and I'm like. And it's just one of those things where it's like, at night, and I might have like a couple of movies, lined up, and I'll be like, all right, you know what, time's a ticking here. This is just garbage. Let me just scan through it. I'll stop on any of the parts that look decent and move on.
There's a boob.
Exactly. Whoop. Okay, hold on. Let's go. Okay, there it is. All right, fast scan. Now, on your website, you not only write about movies that you've seen that you've selected, but you take suggestions from people on your site as well. So would you say at this point that you watch movies that other people recommend, or are you still pretty, you're still selecting them yourself?
Basically, I mean, there's no science to what I mean. I literally almost never know what I'm going to watch until about 5 minutes before I do. I'm actually kind of bad with the recommendation thread. I keep meaning to like go through and make sure I add every movie on there on my queue.
Yeah.
I get Rue Morgue and and I read that, and it's just like they review a few movies I haven't seen yet. I'll put those on the queue. If they sound really good, I'll put them at the top of the queue.
Yeah.
Every now and then I just kind of open up the recommendation thread, I kind of scan through it and make sure that if I have seen a movie that I eventually got around to watching it. Like right now, somebody recommending Rec.
Yep.
I've seen that. So I'll go back and edit the review and thank them for the recommendation, and then delete the comment off the thread just because there's so many recommendations on there. It's getting hard to keep track.
Sure.
It's just like I use the Netflix thing where it's like you add a movie to the queue, and then it's like you might also like these. And I'm like, I do. And I'm seeing everything, so it's not like I'm only watching, vampire movies or something.
Sure.
Where I have to select it and make sure what I'm getting. I'm like, as long as it's a horror movie, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Certainly found enough like movies I really love that I'd never even heard of that way. So.
Do you have a preferred way? I mean, you mentioned Netflix. Do you just mainly go through Netflix, or do you go to Blockbuster as well? I mean, well, you mentioned you go Blockbuster, but or maybe, of course, now I'm forgetting the Cinephile down here in Santa Monica, which for those that live in LA, if you've never been there, you got to go to Cinephile. But is there a preferred way, or you just kind of doesn't really matter?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I do Blockbuster and Netflix mostly through the online, but every now and then I go into the Blockbuster store to trade in the envelope, because you can trade it in for a rental there.
Yep.
I usually do it for like newer stuff, because on the website it gets like filled up. But if you go on Tuesday, it's a pretty good chance it'll still be on the shelf.
Yep.
It's like the very long wait thing.
Sure.
I was using FearNet for some, but then Time Warner took it away. Thanks a lot, Time Warner.
Yeah, I heard about that one. That's unfortunate.
And also, I mean, every now and then, Turner Classic Movies will show something like, like one of the old AIP movies.
Yeah.
Or Val Lewton or something like that, and, I'll watch that. Obviously, there's the theatrical movies that come along, the New Beverly, revival screenings. I mean, it's part of why I do the source. It's just kind of at the top of every review I write, source DVD,
Yeah.
and where, like Netflix or, theatrical, press review. Just to like kind of get people an idea that like I'm not narrowing myself down to just like I'm only watching the movies that I own, or just Netflix.
Sure. Now, because I know when I go into a blockbuster, especially when in the new releases, I'll start I'll walk around, and all of a sudden I'll just start noticing like, oh, there's a new horror movie, and there's another horror movie. Oh, and there's 10 more horror movies that just came out this week. Do you find that as time has gone by, maybe in the last year or so, that there are a lot of horror movies that are coming out that are going straight to video? It's more now than it's ever been.
Yeah. Big one was, Lionsgate picks up a lot, like independent films, and then distributes them.
Yeah.
Can't say the word. Distributes them. Now also with like the digital, they're easier to make, so you're seeing more of them. But what I'm also noticing is that they're stocking less of them. Where, when I first started doing horror movie days, I used to go to Blockbuster, and even the direct-to-video ones that have like 6 or 7 copies of each one, now they have 1 or 2,
Yeah.
Even if they're kind of high profile, like was it the Simon Says one with Crispin Glover?
Yeah.
They only had 2 copies. And what's her name too? From she's only in the movie for like 2 seconds. The girl from Gossip Girl.
Oh yeah.
I think that'd be enough to. What's her name? Blake Lively.
Yep.
That you think that'd be enough to kind of get like like at least a whole shelf line, 8 copies or whatever that is. But they're only getting a couple. So I haven't gone into the store as much. But yeah, I mean, it's just you're even seeing movies with big actors, they're not even get limited releases.
Yeah.
Or they get like terrible limited, like the Night Train, where they just like dumped it in like budget theaters that are out in the middle of nowhere. Instead of giving it like a real limited release.
Yeah, that was a big shame. When I finally got that on, I downloaded that from iTunes, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm watching this movie, I'm like, this is like one of the best films I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And here,
I mean, it ain't sense to me, but
yeah,
I don't run Lionsgate.
You've seen films from every age of horror, from the early days of silent, black and white, to today. Do you have a particular era of film that you like or prefer to watch over any of the others, or they're all kind of?
I don't know if there's none that I dislike, I'll say that much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I love slasher movies, and obviously the slasher heyday was like, between Halloween, which is 1978, just say like 1983, 1984, pretty much anything from that period I'll be alright with. But I mean, because I like so much, it's kind of hard to narrow it down. I mean, I definitely don't like 90s horror that much, because there wasn't really any. It was after Scream, you got a few slashes, most of them stunk. But before that, I mean, I remember getting Fangorias, and like the cover movie would be like Congo, or Judge Dredd. And it's just like, these aren't even horror movies, man, because there's nothing to write about.
Yeah.
Or they do like 10-page articles on a direct-to-video movie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the 90s were weird, because there's like, you have like, you also have Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And then Seven, depending on who you talk to, I don't know. I mean, it could be considered a horror movie. Some people would consider it, just a crime film. But yeah, it was weird. The 90s were very strange that way.
Yeah, I mean, so every now and then I'll catch one that like I'd miss, like it wasn't too recent, but The Dentist, like the Brian Used film.
Yeah.
And they all have this like weird, just sort of blandness to them. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, they're just all real. Like, no one really was trying. I mean, you got a good performance. Colton Burnson was cool, but like everything was just like kind of going through the motions.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, they weren't even really bad either. They're just kind of just bland and forgettable.
Yeah.
Worse, I think. I'd rather watch like a mind-blowingly bad almost than something I won't even remember in time to like write the review up for it.
Well, it's kind of funny, because when you say bland and unforgettable, that's what I kind of equate to the 90s in general.
Yeah.
It was quite a response to the 80s, which I'd like to. Yeah, it's which I find. When you look back at the 80s, and you and I are probably around the same age, and I mean, the 80s was a very lively time, to say the least. But when slasher films came out, and Halloween, even though it was in the 70s, kind of gave birth to a lot of what we would then see in the 80s. But I guess Friday the 13th would be considered like, I guess, one of the first 80s, if not the first 80s slasher film. But the violence, and people are like, oh, the violence and the blood and the gore and stuff. And yes, I mean, some of them got bloodier and gory and fantastic. But I think what I liked the most about those films was that you had a sense of fun, almost like it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, you know, not that you were like, hey, we're going to go see a movie where people get killed. Great. But it was like, you had fun watching it because the scripts or the filmmakers or whatever, the special effects, you were engaged in it somehow, whether it was like a really cool effect that happened or, you know, the chase sequence or whatever it was. And it's unfortunately a time that has gone by.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a shame, too, when I catch one that I'd missed back in that time too, because now, you know, they don't really hold up as well. I mean, they kind of live on through people's nostalgia.
Yeah.
And now, like, you watch it for the first time, it's like, nah, you know, like,
yeah.
I would have loved this when I was 8, but now I'm just kind of, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, people are probably the same way about, you know, they've never seen, you know, Halloween, the original Halloween before, you know, and they watch it now. They're like, why do people like this? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because on your website you talked about Halloween 4 was one of your favorite movies, and I know, again, we're going back to Halloween, but I remember when, because it came out in 88, I think, right? 87, 88. It must have been 88 because I was driving. Yeah. So, yeah. And I can tell you where
you were driving. We're not the same age.
I don't think we're too far off. Give or take. But I am older. But I remember where I was. I remember, you know, I remember the theater. I remember I stood out in the rain to see this damn movie because it was, you know, the first sequel. Michael Myers is back now after part 3, and didn't have him, and it was like, wow. Whenever I think of Halloween 4, that's what I think of. I was like, I stood out in the rain for this movie.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it's interesting how nostalgia kind of catches up with you on stuff like that. But, you know, when we look back at the 70s horror movies, I always hear, you know, if you talk to filmmakers, young filmmakers now, there's always this discussion of going back to the 70s horror movies. You know, when you hear people's favorite films, a lot of them are from the 70s. I'm curious, do you have any sort of have you ever looked into why or thought about why 70s horror movies are held in such a high regard?
Never really gave it too much thought. I mean, to me, it's because they just happen to actually be better, you know what I mean? That there's more of a, obviously that's when, you know, they started showing more, you know, actual on-screen violence, which of course always leaves, you know, not necessarily doesn't make a movie better, but it, you know, leaves the imprint that you kind of need to have that sort of, you know, 20, 25 years later, you're still, you know, talking about it type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were getting more edgy. I mean, you know, you watch the older, you know, even stuff from like the 50s, you know, and there's just a kind of bit of there's no real danger to it. It's not like they ever think about killing a kid or you know, showing, even if they could, you don't think they'd ever like show gore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when you get that visceral visual, yeah, that was a tongue twister. It just kind of leaves that imprint, and I think a lot of the guys that are making films now, you know, that's when they grew up. So I don't doubt that in 20 years, you know, they'll be talking about how scared they were, and the reason they want to make movies is because they saw, you know, Blair Witch Project, Friends Sleepover, or The Ring, or you know, or God help us, like the remakes of all those same movies. You know what I mean? But hey, if that's what inspired them, and they can turn out to be a pretty good filmmaker, then hey, awesome. You know what I mean?
Now it's funny that you mentioned the remakes. Which, I mean, I've lost count of how many remakes have been done in the last, I guess, 10 years, maybe 5. Now, having seen as many movies as you have, and I'm sure you've caught, if not all of them, most of the remakes, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about, and I know it's very general, but what are your general thoughts about the remakes, the current remakes versus the originals?
I can't think of any off the top, at least of this new batch, that I actually prefer to the original. I'd really have to, like, dig pretty deep. Well, let me click on my remake thing while I'm talking. But you know, it's not. I'm not one. Certainly not one of those people that dismisses a remake just as soon as it gets announced. You know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them have a, you know, if you get a good filmmaker behind it, you know, like Last of the Left, I actually do think is better than the original, and it's because you know, the original is just kind of sloppy, and it has that like really odd tonal shift with the two goofy cops, you know, like bumbling about and trying to hitch a ride on a chicken truck and all this other shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so like I think the remake just took what worked about the original, made it stronger, left out what didn't work, and it's like fine, awesome, you know. And then, unfortunately, you also get, like, the Asian remakes, which are just like, oh, it's in, you know, Japanese or Korean, no one's going to see it, let's just do the same movie in English, you know, like Shudder, or, what was the other one that came out last year?
Mirror's
Call.
Yeah, The Call.
You know?
Yeah, one last call, or one missed call.
Yeah, Dark Water, I think was probably one of the weaker ones. Now, some of these movies weren't even good to begin with, and they didn't even change anything. It's like, if you're going to remake a movie, you know, you should try to improve it in some way.
Yeah.
Especially if it wasn't very good to start with. And, you know, for every, you know, sort of like generic, oh, the title, you know, we like the title, let's remake the movie, like Prom Night, where there was no real reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
You get something like Dawn of the Dead, which, like, I was, you know, livid about the announcement of that one at first. It's like, what? You know, how can you remake Dawn of the Dead? But I saw it, and I'm like, you know, this is actually pretty good. You know, they just took the core concept, zombies in a mall, and made their own movie, and it's a fun movie. I can't say it's better or worse because it's just too different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some people don't like this. It's like an action movie with zombies. Well, fine. That's what they're making. You know, if you want the horror movie version with the social commentary, George Romero made it for you. You know, if you want Zack Snyder and James Gunn to do a social commentary slow zombie movie, then you'd just be more pissed. You know, they might as well play to their strengths and make something cool, and make something different.
Yeah.
And even, you know, Halloween, I was just like, well, if somebody had to remake Halloween, I'm glad it was somebody with a vision. You know, like, somebody with a style, you know. Rob Zombie has a style, whether you like him or not. You can't deny that he has his own style.
Yeah.
And, you know, so if they're going to do that, then fine, you know. Like, I'd love to see a filmmaker's, you know, interpretation of an older horror movie. That whether it's better or worse doesn't really matter. It's just a different way of looking at it. Fine. So, you know, it's a case-by-case basis. You know, I like this the other day. I'm glad Platinum Dunes is kind of seemingly backing away from doing The Birds, because, you know, even if it turns out kind of fun, they'll never win that battle. You know what I mean? They're always going to be like, you douchebags, you can't remake Hitchcock, you know? And the things that make The Birds great are the, you know, the things that Platinum Dunes doesn't do. The things that make Birds great is like, you know, interesting characters, humor, suspense. You know, their movies don't have any of that. There's, you know, they have people looking hot and they get killed. So,
well, I was gonna ask you about that.
They're not fun, but it's just a different thing. It's a style of, it's a type. You know, The Birds is a type of film. Rosemary's Baby is another one where they could probably do their own version of it, but it would be the same thing with The Hitch, or no one would accept it. You know. And it's just not even worth the time and effort to remake something that was bad.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about sort of like movies that might be considered off limits. Do you think that there are movies that either should have been off limits to be remade, or are still off limits that haven't been remade yet, or do you just think it's going to happen, filmmakers going to do it, you know?
I mean, I can't say that they've remade every one of my favorite horror movies, so it's like at this point, what am I going to do, you know? They remade Halloween, they remade Dawn of the Dead, they remade Chainsaw, they're remaking Shocker even, for Christ's sake. So it's like, if they're remaking, they remade Psycho for some reason.
And it was shot for shot, I believe, too.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first one, but it was so bad that it took 5 years for somebody else to try, you know, and they did Chainsaw. But you know, for everyone that works, there's one that does. And so it's just like, the reason, what I like to hear is that a filmmaker has come up with an idea to do a remake, a new way of doing it, and wants to do it, rather than, a studio says, hey, we're going to remake this movie, let's go find a director that can do it. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's backwards.
Sure.
If you get a guy, and he did actually, I don't think I actually started that way, unfortunately. But I'm sure there's one where it was like, like a filmmaker, a real filmmaker. It's like, Gus Van Sant, actually, it should have worked in theory, but it just, failed miserably. But Gus Van Sant's an interesting guy, and if he wanted to say, hey, you know what, I have this new idea of a way of remaking, whatever that hasn't been remade yet, Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist, and it wasn't a shot-for-shot remake, I'd be interested in that,
Yeah.
Less interested would I be with, like, Warner Bros. Being like, we're going to reboot The Exorcist, and, well, let's, shop this out to writers. It's like, shouldn't the writer have come to you with a script? They're just, they're doing all these movies backwards now, and there's not much I can do about it.
Yeah.
Start with the release date, then they come up with the MPAA rating, and then they find a writer and a director.
Well, because when I look at how remakes are done, it's like the way I go about thinking it is movies that were remade. Like, perfect example, when John Carpenter remade The Thing, it made sense, and I know when it first came out, critics destroyed it. And I never understood it, and thankfully a lot of them have changed their minds on it. But I can understand it because at that period of time in cinema, you have now technically gone so far past where you were, 30 years prior, that you could make it into something, really an event to go see. But when you look at it from this time period and go back 20 years, I really don't know, other than some CGI and maybe some stunts, maybe, I really don't know what improvements that you can make on it. That's the part that I kind of get frustrated with, because it's like, well, when you have an effects guy like Tom Savini, really, I mean, how are you going to really top that? You're not. And I think that's where I get frustrated.
You said The Thing, which is based on a book, or a short story rather. If you're dealing with that, then I can also see the validity of trying it, because it's like, we're going to be more faithful to the book, or we're going to be less faithful to the book, either way. And another thing is, the thing always makes me think of Body Snatchers. Yeah. And there was like a great thing where like every 20 years they'd remake it, you know what I mean? Because it always had a reflection of the time that it was made in, so that was great, and just fell completely apart with the last one, because Warner Bros. It all up. But it's pretty good that we got, I liked Abel Ferrara's version, the one on the Army base, which is called Body Snatchers. We have 3 versions, and that was based on a book to begin with, or a short story, I forget. That 3 versions of the same thing, but they're all good, I thought. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong if somebody in 10 years was going to say, hey, we're going to do Body Snatchers again, but now it's going to reflect, the post-Obama world, or, whatever the hell's going on in 10 years. Then, hell yeah, that could be interesting, Yeah. But I think when you have a movie that doesn't really have that timeliness built into it, like The Thing, then, why would anybody want to remake it again now? Because you're not going to, how can you improve on it effects-wise, and how can you improve on it directing-wise? Because, that was Carpenter at the top of his game. Yeah. And there was nothing timely about it, and that's, like, the better modern example would be, that they're remaking Let the Right One In. Like, why? We can watch the original. It's brand new. It's, obviously nothing's improved in the effects world. Yeah. Excellent movie anyway, really. Yeah. There was nothing specifically geographically about it that, like people outside of, Norway, or was it Norway? It was Swedish, I forget now, would understand. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you see like some of these Asian horror films, especially the ones from Thailand, and they're really built around their culture, and so some of the stuff is kind of hard to get a grasp on. It just doesn't resonate as much with us. Yeah. But The Right One In is not one of those movies. It's like a very simple movie, and again, the only reason to remake it is to do it in English. Yeah. And actually, I think the guy's talking about, he's like, we're going to keep the snowy climate. It's like, dude, the snowy climate had nothing to do with the movie. But it wasn't like it was built around snow, Yeah. So it's like, right off the bat, I feel like he doesn't quite even get what made the movie work in the first place, and that the remake has absolutely no point of existence.
Having obviously seen as many movies as you have, you've seen not only just the more recent ones. We've talked about how you have seen films from the early days as well. A few months ago, I interviewed someone by the name of Michael Monaghan on my show, and he's an expert on horror hosts, and he's a horror host himself. And during the second interview that we did, we were talking about, because he comes from the generation of the Universal films and all the classics, and he was telling me something very interesting, was that a lot of younger film goers now don't want to either watch silent movies or watch black and white movies, period. And as someone who has seen so many movies yourself, I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
I'm lazy, that's what I'm actually, I don't know if I'm the best person to, because actually I notice I have, like, I don't know if it's narcolepsy or whatever, but I tend to fall asleep a lot when I'm watching movies.
Yeah.
Not because they're bad. In fact, it's more likely I'll fall asleep during a good movie than a bad one.
Yeah.
I just, I get comfortable and I doze off when I'm asleep standing up. So, and I notice that when I'm, doing the subtitles, I fall asleep a little bit more often because it's like my brain's more active or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just start getting and then I doze off and then I can't understand what they're saying. I need to be awake. I need to read. I can't pretend I'm just resting my eyes and listen to it.
Yeah.
And so in a way, I can kind of see where it's like, I don't want to read a movie, which is what you'd have to do for a silent film.
Yeah.
The black and white thing, I really don't understand at all. It's a color. It's not,
Yeah. Very strange.
Detrimental, especially when they're still making black and white movies. Very well received black and white movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not too many horror ones, but with the Clooney one there, Good Night and Good Luck.
Good Night and Good Luck, yeah.
It would, and some of these other ones, people love them, so it's that's a little bit strange. But as far as the silent, I mean, there's a certain, I know I could be hearing these people say these words. Why aren't, I'd rather hear it spoken than read it. Watch a guy say it, watch a guy's mouth moving around, and then stop cold so you can read. It's kind of an awkward way.
Yeah.
Really.
So what you're telling me is that you won't be
dismissed.
Yeah, you won't be watching the 12-hour version of the movie Greed.
Oh yeah, no, that's a pass on that one. Maybe if I do classic partially lost movie a day.com, and I'll check on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I've watched a few silent. I mean, I don't go out of my way, but I watched Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I've never seen. Obviously, I wanted to see that, and what was it? I think I watched Hunchback or Jekyll and Hyde, one of the old silent ones.
Yeah.
Phantom of the Opera, maybe.
I know. Was it Turner? I think it was about a year ago. Turner was doing a lot of Lon Chaney movies. So I went back a lot of the silence, and some of which I've never seen, and I went back and I watched them, and it was nice to sit back and watch them. You kind of forget sometimes.
Yeah.
I
mean, the Universal ones definitely hold up. I think I loved the Wolfman and a lot of the Frankenstein sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, obviously, but even the other ones like Son of and Ghost of or whatever.
Yeah.
Those were they're still fun to watch.
Yeah.
You can, if you watch them all back to back, you can see how they're kind of I don't want to say lazy, but they're kind of budgetary with their screenwriting. It's all the same, but they're fun.
Yeah, they were.
They always end with Frankie, just kind of freaking out and starting a fire, and then they cut to that one shot of a burning model, and that's the end. Yeah, cool.
It's all right, mission accomplished.
Yeah, but there's there's a nice comfort in that or something. You know what I mean? It's building up to a cool fire.
Yeah.
So, and they're, you always get, guys like Lionel Atwill and the other guy that always pops up in them. Well, obviously, Lucy and Cheney and everybody. But,
Basil Rathbone was in one of them, and he was in one of the Frankensteins, and who else? Oh gosh, names are escaping me as well.
Dwight Fry.
Yeah. We talked about before the interview, before we started the interview, that Roger Ebert used one of your quotes in one of his reviews. Why don't you tell everybody the story? It's a really good one.
All right, yeah. Yeah, one day on, I forget if it was Facebook or Twitter or something, one of my buddies wrote, yeah, it was Facebook, he wrote on my wall, he's like, hey, Ebert loves you. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And he was like, your Last House on the Left review. I'm like, huh? So I went, and the funny thing is I'd actually looked at his review already for it, and just kind of skimmed over it and didn't even see it. Apparently, if I can, like, the fourth or fifth paragraph, he's like, on, pull it up, it'll probably take too long, I'll paraphrase. Sorry. Basically, he just said, like, on the website Horror Movie a Day, the well-informed web critic Fright, you know, talked about how the rape scene had been toned down, and then he went off on this tangent how, like, part of his job as a movie reviewer is now to grade the effectiveness of rape scenes or something like that. And then he also said that he screwed something else up that I said, but he kind of missed my point. My point was that the Last House on the Left remake had toned down everything but the rape. They had toned down, like, the, forcing them to pee themselves and making them, like, fondle each other and all this other stuff. Yeah. So that when the rape actually came, and they didn't rape the other girl either. So when they actually raped Marie, it actually was more brutal and more hard to watch, I thought, because by the time that came around in the original, you were just sort of numb to it all. I mean, it was just so excessive. Yeah. And my point was, like, that the original was actually more effective in that regard. Because, I mean, the remake was more effective in that regard because now you really hated these guys for that, Yeah. Whereas the other thing was just so kind of cartoonish almost. Yeah. So you kind of missed that, but I mean, it was still cool to be mentioned by Roger Ebert in a review.
And also, he called you Fright.
Fright. Yeah. I don't know where he got Fright from, but all my buddies have, like, cool horror movie names, Uncle Creepy and Mr. Disgusting. So I guess I should try to work Fright into my name. If my name was Fred or something, that would be so perfect. Fred Fright.
Exactly. Well, you could go stage name. Hey kids, it's Freddy Fright here. Or Frightening Fred. I don't know. Brian, if
you got me wrong. Yeah. At the end of the day, Roger Ebert read my review, so I mean that's awesome.
I would say so. Yeah. Not bad. I mean, I know he has a few readers out there, so not bad.
Yeah.
So, Brian, if anybody wants to check out your website or websites, why don't you throw some plugs in here?
Yeah, it's just horrormovieaday.com. It's on Blogspot. I bought the domain, so you can do horrormovieaday, all one word, .com, and it'll bring you right to it. And there's certainly plenty there to look around, and I always encourage people to leave comments. That was the original intent of the site. Just, talking about the movie. Don't be racist or, bigoted, and don't take personal attacks out on other readers or the filmmakers. Take personal attacks on me, that's fine. I'm actually kind of bummed. I still, I thought after a while I'd have, like most websites have that one guy that just bitches. Like every single thing that gets posted, they post a mean-spirited comment at the writer. Yeah. I still don't have that. In fact, if I may, I find almost all of my readers, at least the ones that post, are really intelligent people. I don't have, like, too many, like, numbskulls that I read their stuff and I'm just like, oh my god, this guy's a moron. And they're all, like, really thoughtful and they really care, and I'm really happy about that because I read, like, the talk back on some of the other horror sites. It's just like, Jesus, where are these people coming from? It's so fun and dumb. But the people, even when they're disagreeing with me, it's like they post their thoughts and they explain themselves, and I love that. But always just that's what I encourage the most. People talk back, whether you agree with me or not. It's what you think. But that's the only site. Bloody Disgusting doesn't need my plug. I think they got enough readers on their own.
He's Brian Collins. He runs the website Horror Movie a Day, and Brian, I hope we get some more people coming over from the graveyard, checking out your site, and give us some suggestions and some thoughtful comments.
That's thoughtful.
Yeah.
Or hateful things aimed at me, because I find it funny.
Brian, thanks for joining me in the graveyard. It was great having you in.
Oh, anytime, man. Thank you. It was fun.
And that was a lot of fun, I have to say. It was a blast having Brian here in the graveyard. And again, it's Horror Movie a Day. That's horror-movie-a-day.blogspot.com. Definitely check it out. It's entertaining stuff. And Brian, as you can tell, he brings it. Great guest. And I can't wait to have him back on the show again down the road to talk more horror movies. Looking ahead to next week, well, I'm going to give you an assignment, my friends. It's a reading assignment. For those of you out there that are zombie fans, more specifically George Romero zombie fans, well, I have a special treat for you. He is author Kim Paffenroth, and he is the author of the book Gospel of the Living Dead, George Romero's vision of hell on earth in his zombie movies, Night Through Land of the Dead. Kim and I had such a good conversation that it's going to be taking up 2 shows. That's right, zombie fans. So if you are a zombie fan, or you know of one, and I know there are many of you out there, spread the word, my friends. Spread the word. Kim Paffenroth will be here. It's sort of like, well, if you've listened to my shows with Christopher Sharrett, who is a professor over at Seton Hall University, when Chris is on the show, we talk film criticism, which is essentially, it's not a movie review like we had tonight. Film criticism is more of an analytical look at what a film is saying, what the meaning of the film might be, symbolism, that kind of stuff. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about with Kim. And he breaks down the first 4 of the Romero trilogy of zombie films. See if I caught you on your toes there. Yeah. We also talk a little bit about the Dawn of the Dead remake. And in his book, he also mentions 28 Days Later. So if you haven't read the book, I highly suggest you do so, especially if you're a fan of the films, because it is really good stuff. And I think it will also open your eyes to seeing these movies in a new way. I know for me it did. And like many of you, I've seen these films many, many times, at least Night and Dawn, and a little bit of Day. Not so much Land, I've seen it a few times. But it's a great breakdown. So that'll be taking us out of the month of July. August, planning, nothing yet to tell you, but putting together some fun stuff for August, and September, October, I have a wish list together. Nothing confirmed yet, so just looking ahead for the next couple of weeks. So again, Kim Paffenroth next week. As I like to do, or try to do every week, I'd like to thank you for downloading the show, taking the time to listen. I know there are a lot of horror podcasts out there, so you have plenty to choose from. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to The Graveyard Show. And as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.
Terror strikes fear into the hearts of innocent people. The morgue receives the victims of the blind dead.
And the survivors do everything they can to try and figure out how to stop the blind dead, including listening to podcasts. Summer Nights every week in August. Dread Media and Mail Order Zombie will cover one of the Blind Dead films starting on Thursday, August 6th at mailorderzombie.com. The reviews begin with Tombs of the Blind Dead and continue the following Monday with a review of the same film on Dread Media, all the way through August until the final 4th week in August. Dread Media and Mail Order Zombie cross over to discuss the entire series of Armando de Osorio's Spanish zombie films. MailOrderZombie.com and DreadMedia.net. It's gonna be one hot summer night.
This is the Deacon of Darkness, the posthumous pimp freak show from Bordello of Horror. Myself, along with the Harlots of Horror, host this monthly video cast with featured films, interviews, news, reviews, and more. Check us out online at MadisonHorror.com. Proud to be members of the Horror Podcasting Network. That's MadisonHorror.com and Bordello of Horror.
Hurry, hurry.
Step right up. The most amazing tales appear
Before your
very eyes, gathered from
the four
corners of earth and brought here to you
at
19 Nocturne Boulevard. See the
famous
man-eating book of
Sumatra.
or a phantom
Some
direct from merry old England, or aliens
From beyond
the
star.
Even such as these cannot withstand our platinum death ray.
Yes, our platinum death ray.
all these and more spread out before you.
And all
We ask is a moment of your
time. Spin the wheel.
and
Take a chance.
Try your luck.
www.19nocturneboulevard.net